Void Miner, Seed of Change, Part 8, Chapter 35, The Gathering. The shrine door swung inward with the soft groan of old bronze on stone. Incense drifted out first, cedar and mountain sage, followed by the cool breath of subterranean air. Kaelric stepped through and felt the hush settle over him. The ceiling arched low, its ribs carved from single slabs of basalt. In the center stood the council dais, a circle of 9 seats, half dwarven stonework, half elven woodcraft, joined without seam. Between them ran a strip of translucent arcan, pulsing faintly, alive but subdued, like a vein beneath skin. Risa's boots clicked once, twice, then stopped. "Feels like a tomb," she muttered. Tovin inclined his head toward the far wall, where the 3 faces had been chiseled into the rock. "All judgment chambers are tombs of a sort. Only question is what dies, a lie or a truth?" Doric Stonehand was already standing. He filled his half of the circle the way a mountain fills its valley. A beard hung in heavy braids bound by iron rings, and his left hand was wrapped in a blacksmith's bandage still dark from soot. "So," he said, voice carrying across the chamber, "the Skyborn returns. Thought you traded your father's forge for the mountain's grave, boy." Kaelric bowed his head slightly. "Master Stonehand?" "Don't call me that," Doric snapped. "You forfeited the title when you crossed the markers. You took 3 with you, one of ours, one of theirs, and something the records don't even name." Risa bristled. "If you're counting me among the lost, best revise your tally. I'm standing last I looked." "That may change once we hear what he's done," Doric shot back. A murmur passed through the other counselors. On the elven side, High Speaker Seelith Avnar folded his long fingers together. "We have felt the surge in every lamp and healing stone. Our records mark no such resonance since the ancient forging wars. The mountain sings again, Kaelric Arston. We would know why." Kaelric stepped forward until the arcane veins beneath the floor brightened under his boot. "Because it wanted to," he said quietly. "Because it remembers being alive." Doric barked a humorless laugh. "The mountain doesn't want. It heals or it kills, always has." Tovin lifted a hand. "Master Stonehand, if you would only listen—" "I'm listening to madness," Doric said. "And madness burns forges and homes alike." Risa slammed her palm on the stone rail. "Madness don't hold the roof when the tunnel screamed. They did, with nothing but that hammer and will enough to shame the old kings." The echo hung in the vaulted chamber like a bell still quivering. Tovin stepped forward beside her. "The arcane doesn't answer blood or creed, Doric. It answers resonance, harmony. He found it where the rest of us only heard noise." Seelith's eyes narrowed. "You speak as though it chose him." "Perhaps it did," Tovin said. "Or perhaps he simply listened long enough to hear what we forgot." The elven scribes scratched furiously at their tables. Doric's fist closed. "Fine words. Pretty. But the forges flared last night without bellows. The widow's hull shone like sunrise. You call that harmony? I call it a warning." Kaelric took a slow breath. "You're afraid it will cost you what it gave back." Doric's jaw flexed. "Aye, because gifts like that have a price paid in ash." Kaelric looked past him to the open space of the hall where the arcane vein pulsed between dwarves and elven feet alike. "Then maybe it's time someone paid in understanding instead." A few of the elves murmured assent. A few dwarves scowled deeper. The line of light between them brightened for an instant, then steadied, as if the mountain itself withheld judgment. Seelith lifted his chin. "You've walked where none of us dared. You've touched power no mortal was meant to wake. Tell us truly, Kaelric Arston, did you command it? No, Kaelric said. I asked. The chamber went still. Tovin's gaze softened, recognition dawning. Rhesa's finger tightened around her hammer strap on her shoulder. Doric's voice dropped to a growl. And it answered. Kaelric met his eyes. It listened. For a heartbeat, Doric had no retort. The silence pressed until the old stone itself seemed to creak. Seelith leaned forward. Then speak, child of the stars. Tell us what it said. Kaelric hesitated, his mouth open. But before he could shape the first word, the sound of feet and murmurs bled faintly through the heavy doors behind them. The villagers had gathered outside, waiting for verdict or spectacle. The hum of fear and hope wove together, thin as smoke. Rhesa looked toward the doors. Word travels fast. Tovin murmured, and fear faster. The hammer at Kaelric's belt gave a single low pulse, one he felt in bone more than heard. Not warning yet, but attention. He looked back to the council. If you want to know what the mountain said, he began, you'll have to listen the way it does, without shouting over the echoes. Doric scowled. And what would you have us hear? The truth, Kaelric said simply, that it's not done with us. Seelith's brows drew together, uneasy. The arcane veins across the chamber flickered once in agreement, or warning. No one could tell. The bell in the tower above the shrine struck once more, long and low, cutting through the argument like a blade through cloth. The bell's note died into the rock. Silence settled after it, thin, sharp, waiting to be broken. Doric leaned on the council rail. Fine. You asked, the mountain listened. Then answer me this, boy. What keeps it from crushing the valley when it tires of your questions? Rhesa's reply landed like a hammer blow. Fear never braced a roof beam, Stonehand. We stood together below, and the stone held. Together with an orc and a goblin, he spat. Grask's tusked jaw moved once. Stood, bled, kept roof, Crix added, soft but clear. No steal, no bite. A shiver passed through the chamber. Several counselors blinked, each hearing those rough words in their own tongue, though none shared it. Tovin's staff gleamed faintly. You feel it, he murmured. Meaning travels when we stop smothering it in fear. The Archon bears intent. Seelith, the high speaker, studied the pulsing seam beneath the floor. Intent is not law. Our first duty is the valley's safety. Aye, Doric said. And safety means not gibbling our homes on a lad's fancies. He turned towards his own bench. Hold him under watch. Question at dawn. Better a restless night than a dead one. Murmurs rose. On the Alvin side, a silver-braided counselor shook his head. Confinement will birth panic faster than sense. And letting him walk makes fools of us, Doric shot back. Outside, the forecourt murmured. Hundreds of voices pressed close to the shrine doors, half prayer, half rumor. The hammer at Kaelric's side gave one low pulse, felt more in bone than heard. Not warning. Awareness. Kaelric lifted his head. I came to speak, not to hide. If you cage me, you'll only teach the valley that fear sits in these chairs. Doric's jaw tightened. And if fear's the only thing keeping us breathing. Rhesa stepped closer, dwarven growl steady. Fear's a poor guard. It trusts in the rain. We can hold this if we hold together. Celis' voice gentled. Kaelric Arston, give us something firm. No riddles, no half-truths. Kaelric met his gaze. No secrets, he said. We did not command the mountain. We steadied what woke. It would have fallen through the world if we hadn't. He let the stillness drink the words. And it wants us alive. That made them shift. Not belief, not denial, but unease that sounded almost like hope. Doric rubbed the black scar along his knuckles. Say we believe your judgment. Do we trust your judgment? You're barely 15 winters, and you talk to stone like it's your mother. Tovin answered softly, vowels smooth as water. Then speak to him as fathers and mothers do, with teaching, not chains. Cage what the mountain notices, and it'll notice the cage next. The words struck deep enough that Doric's eyes flicked away to the arc and seam again, wary. From outside came a child's clear voice. Did he fix the warm floors? Laughter and shushing followed, nervous but kind, the way only neighbors sound when fear starts to soften. Even Seelith smiled faintly. Doric sighed through his beard. Hell's below, hear me. One night's watch, no shackles. The boy stays within the shrine till dawn. If the stone keeps still, he walks free at noon. Risa's hand hovered near her hammer. You'll pin a lad who came honest? Seelith raised his palm. Or invite chaos if we don't, Kaelric Arston. Will you accept one night of council watch? With ye companions safe and treated as guests of Stonebrook? The hammer thrummed once, then quieted, as if waiting. Deep below, the widow's core hummed in sympathy, steady as a heartbeat under earth. Not yet, the pulse seemed to say. Wait. Kaelric looked from Seelith to Doric, then to Risa and Tovin. Risa's glare promised she'd break the door if needed. Tovin's eyes urged patience. Grask shifted his weight, silent and waiting. Crix flipped a coin once and caught it flat. I agree, Kaelric said. A door that closes and opens by trust, not fear. My friends stay near, and if the stone speaks before morning, you listen before you reach for chains. Seelith inclined his head. On the three, I so swear, Doric muttered. I swear by the work, not the stone, but I. Outside, the villagers began the safe walk chant. Old words for calm and passage. Dozens of voices, uneven but sincere. The scribe read the record aloud. Provisional watch, one night, no iron enclosures. The hammer's hum steadied, content but alert. Seelith rose. This session stands in recess till dawn. Let the valley rest without rumor. He turned to Risa. Smith iron flask. You and the healer will speak again come morning. Risa grunted. Plain words, you'll get 'em. Doric gathered his rings and tools. Boy, he said without malice, if dawn brings lies, I'll see them. Kaelric nodded once. Then dawn will not. Wardens approached, not soldiers, only stewards of the shrine. They gestured toward a side passage where guest rooms waited, doors with latches, not locks, beds built by patient hands. Risa took Kaelric's shoulder. Tovin matched his pace. Grax and Crix followed, silent sentinels. No one touched the hammer. None needed to. As the door closed behind them, the arcane vein in the floor flared pale, a line of dawn beneath the mountain. Seelith watched with quiet reverence. Doric watched with the caution of a man who knows ore can burn. Outside, the murmuring crowd began to thin, uncertain, yet unwilling to leave. Kaelric paused at the corner where the passage bent and listened one last time. Valley, ship, mountain. All three heartbeats matched for a breath. He exhaled. Together, he whispered. Together? Risa echoed. Together, Tovin said softly. Grask rumbled the same word in Urkthal. Crix clicked his agreement. The door closed, and the hum that lingered in the air sounded almost like a promise kept. Chapter 36. The Hammer and the Flame. They had given him a room, not a cell, but stone was stone, no matter what name you wrapped around it. Kaelric lay awake on the narrow cot, staring at the dark lines in the ceiling above him. The shrine's guest chambers pressed close on all sides. A square of smooth-cut stone, a thick oaken door with a latch bar outside, a single slit window set high that caught the thinnest slice of the morning. A small lamp guttered low on a shelf, its arcing crystal dimmed to a sleepy ember. He could feel the valley through the rock. It was like listening with his bones. Arcane veins ran beneath Stonebrook in quiet threads, pulsing slower now that the first surge had passed, but not asleep. Nothing about the world felt asleep. He rolled onto his side and let his hands rest on the hammer's worn haft. They'd let him keep it. That had surprised him. Maybe they hadn't thought to ask. Maybe the wardens didn't quite know what was his and what belonged to the valley anymore. The wood felt warm, even in the chill room. Not hot, not dangerous. Just the warmth of something that had been gripped too long by living hands. He closed his eyes and listened. Far above, faint as breath on glass, he heard the widow's hum, a thin, steady note that had nothing to do with wind or river. It answered the arcane's rhythm, a higher harmony threading the slow ground beat. When he focused, he could feel the shape of it. Hull, core, the old ship's bones waking and stretching after a long, cold sleep. "Still there," he murmured to no one. The hammer answered with a tiny pulse in his palm. He exhaled and sat up. Sleep wasn't coming. The bell had rung for recess. The council had gone their ways. Risa, Tovin, Grask, and Crix had been led to a chamber nearby, promised food and blankets and guest treatment. That sounded too careful to be comfort. He watched them go, and felt Risa's hand squeeze his shoulder once. Tovin's look of warning softened into trust. Grask had only grunted. Crix had offered a quick, nervous grin with too many teeth. Then the door had closed, and the shrine had swallowed him. Now he stood and crossed to the window slit. It was no wider than his hand laid flat. Outside, the sky was paling from black to dark blue. From night into that thin gray hour before dawn when the world decides whether to stir. He saw only a sliver of it, but it was enough. "This is the only sky I've ever known," he whispered, testing the words he knew he would need soon. They felt true. They felt heavy. Below the window, the wall was cool against his forehead. The veins inside it hummed as if in answer. There was no comfort in the sound, but there was steadiness. It reminded him of Arg's breathing when the man slept, slow, stubborn, unbroken. He let it hold him there a moment, until the tightness in his chest loosened just enough to let air through. The latch outside his door rattled. Kaelric stepped back, hand falling instinctively to the hammer's hilt. The door opened inward, a crack, then wider. No guard filled the frame. Only one man. Arg. He stood outlined by lamplight from the corridor, a stocky shadow with soot still smudged along one temple, hair going iron gray at the sides. He wore his work coat over his tunic, half fastened in haste, as if he'd thrown it on just to walk these steps. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Kaelric opened his mouth. "Duh," the word caught. Arg's eyes were not the angry stone they had been when Kaelric was younger and reckless, nor the blazing furnace he'd seen when ships and wars had threatened them. There was something else now, tired, measuring, full of a weight that had nothing to do with his age. He didn't speak. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him with a soft push, and crossed the room in 3 slow strides. The lamp on the shelf caught his face, drew deep lines where laughter and worry had carved their marks over the years. Kaelric stood very still, afraid to shatter whatever fragile thing that had taken shape in the silence between them. Arg reached for his belt and drew something from it. Not a weapon. A key. Heavy. Iron. Worn smooth at the teeth from years in a forge hand. There were a dozen such keys in Stonebrook, each cut for an old door or an old chest. This one belonged to the underforge. Kaelric recognized the notch. Arg didn't look at him as he set it down on his low stool by the bed. His hand paused there, knuckles whitening around the iron, then loosening. He straightened, eyes lingering on the hammer at Kaelric's side. For an instant, something like pride flickered there, or grief, or both layered together until they were hard to tell apart. His gaze lifted at last to meet his son's. Whatever words had come so easily in Kaelric's imagination, advice, warning, apology, blessing, found no shape in Arg's mouth. He only nodded once, a small thing, almost nothing, and yet everything. That same nod he'd given at the gates when Kaelric had been led toward the shrine. I see you. I won't stop you. Then he turned, opened the door, and walked out. He didn't close it all the way. The latch caught only halfway, leaving a sliver where light and sound could pass. Kaelric stared after him until the steps faded. The room felt different now, though nothing had changed. The bed, the shelf, the little lamp, the stone walls, all the same. Only now there was an iron key on the stool and a door that didn't quite sit in its frame. He walked up to the stool and picked the key up. It was warm from his father's hands. Then use yourself, Tovin's voice echoed in his memory. Your aura's the bridge. The Archon already listens to you. He rolled the key between thumb and forefinger. He could go now. He could slip down the corridor, move like a shadow, vanish into the waking village. But that wasn't what the key was for. Arg hadn't left it so his son could run. He left it because he knew chains, even soft ones, did something to a man that time in the dark never quite undid. Kaelric set the key back. I'm not running, he said aloud, just to hear it. Not from you, not from them. The hammer pulsed in answer, a slow, approving thump against his hip. He drew it now, more for comfort than intent. The head caught what little lamp glow there was, reflecting it back with a faint bluish sheen, arcane veins echoing through the light as if remembering its shape. Where metal met haft, a thin line of faintly brighter glow traced a seam that had never been there before Althera. He rested the hammer's head lightly against the door where the latch sat. The wood's grain was old, oil-soaked, scarred by use, a symbol of a village that preferred sturdy over fine. I'm not breaking you, he whispered to the door, ridiculous as it felt. You are not my enemy either. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and let the hum in his chest rise until it matched the quiet thrum of Archon in the walls. The hammer woke to it, heat blooming under his palm, not painful, but insistent. The metal in the latch began to soften. He could feel it, not in sight, but in sensation. The way tension bled out of the lock, the way the bolt inside the wood loosened its grip like a hand unclenching. Threads of bright warmth slipped through the hammer's head into the iron, reshaping the tight structure into something slack and useless. A curl of smoke rose from the latch where metal met wood. No flame, just the faint scent of heated iron. Kaelric opened his eyes. The door had sagged a fraction in its frame. He tried the handle. It swung inward at his touch, the warped latch no longer holding it. The key on the stool watched him from the corner of his vision. He left it there. In the corridor beyond, the lamps were turning low. The shrine's passageways were mostly empty at this hour. Wardens kept their post at the main doors, not over a boy in a guest room with no official sentence yet hanging over his head. He moved softly, boots finding the places in the stone that didn't complain. The archon beneath the floor guided him, not with words, but with warmth, stronger toward one end of the passage, weaker toward the other. The stronger path led upward, toward the shrine's main hall. The weaker led down, toward the undercroft beneath the village forge, the old place Risa had once called where the mountain's breath curls up to listen. The outline in his head was clear as a map. If he went up, he went to the council. If he went down, he went to the roots. He chose down. The stairs slept beneath his feet, spiraling into the cooler air. The hum of the village faded and was replaced by the deeper, slower throb of the valley's core. Here the arcane veins were closer to the surface, braided into the very steps themselves. Their faint glow painted his knuckles ghost blue where his hand brushed the wall for balance. At the bottom, the passage leveled and opened into a broad chamber, the underforge. It sat directly beneath Stonebrook's main smithy, its ceiling hung with the bottom halves of anvils and hearthstones, like roots of iron reaching down. Racks of tools set in careful order along the walls, chisels, tongs, hammers, wedge irons, all oiled and resting. In the center of the chamber stood a single heavy door bound in dark metal. Old Law had named it the listening room centuries ago, a place where disputes thicker than a shouted argument were brought to be hammered out below the forge, where the mountain could hear and judge. Now it stood half ajar. Kaelric approached and saw no one guarding it. Not neglect, he realized. Trust in stone and habit. No one expected a boy raised in the valley to break a shrine door and walk into the underforge before judgment. "Maybe you don't know us as well as you think," he murmured. He pushed the door with his shoulder and slipped inside. The listening room was round and low-ceilinged, with benches carved directly from the walls. In the center stood a wide, flat block of stone that had seen more elbows than chains. This wasn't a cell and never had been. It was a place where people sat facing their own choices while the mountain listened. The arcane veins in the floor here were bright enough to see by without lamps. Their glow painted the chamber in soft blue and white, flickering faintly as if reacting to his breathing. He stepped to the center and set the hammer down head first on the stone block. The hum in the room changed. Before, it had been a steady thrum of sleeping power. Now it took on a tone, almost like a note sung under the breath. The hammer answered with a deeper undertone. The two sounds twined, drifted apart, then settled into a shared rhythm. Kaelric closed his eyes. He remembered Doric's skull, Silas' questions, the crowd's narrowed eyes, Grask's quiet strength at his back, Crix's nervous jokes, Risa's stubborn loyalty, Tovin's calm, Arg's silence. He remembered the mountain's light pouring through him in the Heartforge, the way it had wanted to tear him apart, and the way, between the one heartbeat and the next, it had chosen not to. "You woke us," he whispered to the air, to the stone, to whatever listened. "Now let me wake them the right way." The arcane veins nearest his boots flared in answer. Then the hum began to climb. It rose slowly at first, like a forge warming under careful bellows. The glow at his feet brightened, spreading outward in ripples along the floor. The hammer drank from it, the lines along its head igniting one by one until they traced the full pattern in steady light. Kaelric felt heat crawl up the handle and into his fingers, then into his arms, then his chest. Not burning, expanding, as though someone was pouring molten metal into a mold that had always been waiting inside his bones. His breath matched the rhythm without effort. In, out, in, out. The world narrowed to arcane impulse, stone and skin. Somewhere above him, the village had begun to stir. The day shift rising, forges being readied, morning prayers murmured. Those were distant noises. Down here, a different awakening was happening. The first lick of blue flames curled gently around the hammer's head. It wasn't fire in a way that Stonebrook knew it. It did not consume. It did not smoke or lick hungrily at the air. It wrapped the metal in a soft, steady aureole, like a lantern's light remembered on the inside of closed eyes. From the hammer it slid down, tracing Kaelric's fingers, circling his wrist. He watched it without flinching. It felt like plunging his hand into warm water after hours in the cold. Shock, then relief, then a sense of righteousness. When he lifted his palms away from the haft, the flame came with them. Blue light pooled on his hands. It didn't drip or flare. It simply was, a living thing resting in the cup of his skin. The veins on the back of his hands glowed faintly beneath it, as though his blood had learned the same trick. He flexed his fingers. The light flexed too. "Not a weapon," he told it. "Never a weapon." It pulsed once. He picked up the hammer with his right hand and held the gathered light in his left. It hovered there, calm and obedient, throwing shadows that danced along the chamber walls like old stories, reenacted in miniature. Then he turned and walked back towards the door. The listening room's heavy oak swung open before he'd reached it. The old hinges didn't creak now. They moved as if pushed by the same unseen pressure that stirred the Archon. He climbed the stairs, each step leaving a faint print of light that faded as his foot lifted. The corridor above seemed dim, as if the walls themselves had decided to help. When he reached the shrine side passage, he heard them. Voices beyond the main doors, many now. Not just a handful of wardens and curious onlookers. The village had come early, drawn by rumor and the restless night. Kaelric paused at the threshold where the side passage met main hall. The grated front doors loomed ahead, barred, but not bolted. Arcane seams shining along their edges like the lines of a palm. Beyond them, he could feel the weight of bodies in the square, the fear, the anger, the sliver of hope that no one wanted to name yet. The flame in his hand burned steady and quiet. "All right," he said under his breath. "Let's see if we can keep you as you are." He walked toward the doors, carrying the hammer in one hand and the calm arcane fire in the other. Outside, the crowd's murmur swelled. Someone shouted his name, half accusation, half plea. The shrine wardens turned at the sound of his steps. Eyes widened at the sight of the light coiled around his fingers. "Kaelric?" one began. The doors shuddered as the arcane veins running through their frames reacted to what he held. Wood and stone and metal all hummed together, a chorus without words. He reached for the bar across the doors. Behind him, the underforge hum answered, rising in pitch. Ahead of him, the widow's distant chord tightened its rhythm to match. Kaelric set his shoulder to the wood and pushed. The doors began to open. The shrine doors swung open on a breath of cold air and incense. Kaelric stepped out, hammer in his right hand, arcane light cupped in his left. Stonebrook was fully awake and fully uneasy. The square overflowed with villagers, dwarves in soot-marked aprons, elves in half-fastened cloaks, all drawn by fear, curiosity, or both. Stonebrook had seen outsiders before, travelers, traders, wanderers, but never an orc and never a goblin standing openly inside the square. Even one of each was enough to stiffen every spine. Crix hovered close to Risa, the sole goblin present, his long ears pinned back, his eyes flicked with sharp, nervous movements as the crowd stared. Grask stood a short distance away, massive, unmoving, the only orc Stonebrook had ever hosted. His hands stayed open, away from his weapons. Still, his jaw was tight, the tension in his muscles obvious. The lanterns along the eaves flickered as the arcane veins beneath the cobbles brightened, reacting to Kaelric's presence. The blue-white flame in his palm pulsed gently, casting soft light across the square. Then came the voices. "There he is. Back. Give him space. What's he holding? That light. By the shrine. It's alive. Why isn't it burning him? Kaelric paused at the top of the steps. The crowd thinned before him, drawing back as though uncertain as to what he had become. His eyes found Arg. Arg stood near the front, not rushing to him, not holding back, simply present. The lines on his face were deeper, carved by worry. Kara stood at his shoulder, her shawl tight around her, eyes full of fear she did not voice. Kaelric descended the steps slowly. Each footfall caused the arcane veins in the stone to brighten. He kept the flame close, dimming it so that its glow softened instead of flaring. He wanted them to see calm, not threat. A dwarven apprentice flinched as Kaelric neared. His mother yanked him back sharply, whispering warnings. Kaelric reached the bottom of the steps and stopped. I walked out a door that wasn't locked, he said quietly. That's all. Silence rippled outward. His voice carried clearly, not because of volume, but because the arcane threads near him resonated, amplifying the meaning. A dwarven woman jabbed finger toward the flame. That? You call that nothing? Kaelric glanced at the pale glow. It's the mountain answering back, he said. That didn't ease anyone. If anything, it deepened the unease. The last time the mountain lit this bright, we had fire from the skies, someone murmured. That was before he was born. Light like that never comes for free. Kaelric didn't argue. Instead, he softened the flame. It flowed gently around his fingers like glowing water. No heat, no danger. He stepped toward a broad-shouldered dwarven smith near the front. You know heat, Kaelric said. Better than any of us. Will you test it? The smith blinked. I'm no fool, lad. That's why I'm asking, Kaelric replied. The dwarf hesitated, then stepped forward. He extended his hand over the flame. No burn, no hiss, no pain. He touched it. His eyes widened. Warm, not scorching, not pulling. Like tempered stone just off the anvil. He turned to the crowd. It ain't hurting anything. A faint shift passed through the villagers, tension loosening, not gone. Then Doric Stonehand's voice cut through everything. And what happens, he growled, when it decides to act otherwise? The dwarven counselor stepped forward, arms crossed. Stone splits when it wants. Fire changes its mind without warning. And whatever you dragged out to those mountains, his gaze flicked from grass to cricks in the hammer. You brought it into my village. Kaelric didn't flinch. I didn't bring danger to Stonebrook, he said. I brought the truth of what woke beneath it. Doric's expression tightened. Show us the truth, then. If this listening you claim is real, let the valley hear it. Kaelric lifted the flame. It responded to him gently, like an animal that trusted only one hand. He looked toward an elven healer whose wrists were red from the recent arcane lamp flare. May I help? She hesitated, then offered her arm. Kaelric touched the flame to her skin. The redness faded. The pain left her eyes. A gasp traveled through the crowd. It heals, she whispered. It doesn't burn. It soothes. Kaelric drew the flame back, letting it float upward like a lantern freed from his hand. Children reached toward it in wonder. The flame dipped, brushing their fingers gently. A ripple of astonished laughter followed. Kaelric closed his hand. The flame obeyed instantly. I can keep this calm, he said, his voice steady. I can stand between Stonebrook and whatever comes next. But if something threatens this valley, he lifted the hammer slightly, I will meet it. The ground trembled. Not the widow, not the mountain. A far heavier rhythm. Footfalls. Dozens, maybe more. Grask stiffened, muscles coiling. He rumbled a warning in Urkthal. Kaelric understood perfectly, but the villagers only caught the translated meaning because they stood within his aura. Warband, approaching. Fast! Crix bound up a post, chittering in skitter speak. Again, Kaelric's aura let those nearby hear his meaning. Too many, too many, too many coming. Fear surged across the square. Weapons lifted. Shouts rose. People pulled their children behind them. Kaelric stepped forward. Not a weapon unless I choose, he whispered. The flame pulsed once in reply. He walked toward the gate as the tremors grew louder, and the villagers realized the threat was real. Chapter 37. The Trial of Fire. The tremors deepened, no longer distant, no longer uncertain. The ground beneath Stonebrook began to shake with rhythm, with weight, with purpose. It wasn't the widow this time, and it wasn't the mountain shifting. It was footsteps, dozens, possibly more. The villagers felt it first in their chests, then through their feet, then in the tightening grip on weapons and children alike. Grask stiffened, muscles going hard as stone. He turned sharply toward the valley mouth, nostril flaring. He spoke a low, urgent growl in Urkthal, and because he stood well within Kaelric's aura, everyone close enough heard the meaning in their own tongue. Warband, many. A ripple of terror spread through the square. Crix scrambled up a wooden railing with a chittered burst in skitterspeak, claws digging grooves in the beam. Too many, too many, too many. Again, those inside Kaelric's aura heard the warning clearly, though the actual sounds were foreign and frantic. Villagers recoiled. Some fled backwards with hands over their children's shoulders. Others brandished weapons. Several turned immediately and wrongly toward Grask and Crix. You brought them here, a dwarven miner yelled, voice cracking. That's an orc signal, another shouted. Elven gods, form a line. Humans should never have come. Look at what you brought down on us. Kara flinched at that last one, breath trembling. Ark stepped forward, but Kaelric lifted a hand, stopping him before a word left his mouth. He could feel the air folding in on itself, fear sharpening into blame. The past threatened to repeat itself in an instant. Risa slammed the end of her hammer against the ground. Enough, you fools! He's standing right there. Look at the lad. But they didn't look at him. They looked at the flame, and the hammer, the seed-forged hammer, a strange alloy of trial-born resonance formed long before Kaelric had ever drawn breath. Fear seldom listened to reason. Kaelric felt the trembles rising, closer, clearer, now finding rhythm like a beating heart. They didn't have time for fear. He stepped forward into the widening space between villagers and outsiders. Risa's hand clenched around his sleeve. Kaelric, don't you dare! Tovin stepped to his other side. We stand with you. But this, whatever you're about to do, it will change everything. Kaelric exhaled slowly. It already has. He moved past them. The flame in his hand pulsed once, neither warning nor threat, just awareness. The hammer at his side throbbed with matching resonance, its seed-born core vibrating in sympathy with the mountain's pulse. As he reached the front line of villagers, he stopped and turned. For the first time in Stonebrook's memory, a single boy faced an entire village and an approaching warband without lifting a weapon. He felt the aura flare around him, a subtle widening of perception, a hum beneath his ribs, the faint shimmer of arcanlight threading through the ground. The villagers didn't see the aura's edge, but they felt it when he spoke. Kaelric raised his voice, just enough to carry. And when the words came out, 5 languages spoke at once. Common. Listen to me. Ilarian. Salen Vera. Dervak. Gromthruken. Urkthal. Grathmok. Skitterspeak. Cheat Chili. 5 tongues, layered in a single harmonic tone. One voice, one meaning. It hit the square like a wave. Several villagers cried out and stumbled backwards. A few dropped weapons from the shock. An elf clapped both hands over her ears, stunned by the harmonic undertones. A dwarf blinked rapidly as if his brain struggled to reconcile hearing Durvok from a human mouth. Tovin whispered, "By the three faces." Risa's hand tightened around her hammer. "Forge preserve us, lad. Where are ye?" Kaelric didn't answer. He turned toward the gate. The tremors grew louder, heavy, thunderous, coming down the valley's spine. Grask stepped up beside him, towering and tense. "Kaelric," he said in Urkthal, the guttural cadence thick with warning. "Do not stand alone." Kaelric responded in the same tongue, cleanly, fluently, effortlessly. Risa and Tovin heard the translated, common, Durvok, Ilarian versions through the aura. "I must." Grask's eyes widened, just for a breath. Then he nodded once and stepped back, not in surrender, but in respect. Kara cried out, "Kaelric, please." Arg moved toward him. "Son!" Kaelric looked at Arg, and something in his eyes, aged beyond 15 years, made Arg stop cold. "Trust me," Kaelric whispered. The first orc of the warband appeared over the ridge. Then another, and another, and another. Dozens, painted in war ink, armored in bone, weapons raised, roaring into the sky. Stonebrook tensed like a bowstring ready to snap. Kaelric stepped into open ground between the gate and the village. The flame rose from his hand, brightening. The hammer, the scene-board artifact, created from fragments of his parents' trials, hummed in response. Kaelric planted his feet. Then he lifted the flame toward the heavens and struck the hammer lightly against the earth. A resonant shockwave rippled outward. Arcane veins flared to life across the valley floor, threading light between the stones, racing toward the gate. Villagers gasped as the blue-white glow surged past their feet. Not hot, not wild. Disciplined. Obedient. Arcane threads rose from the ground like strands of woven light and formed themselves into a shimmering barrier across Stonebrook's gate. A shield. A wall. A promise. The first orc of the warband slammed into it and staggered back as if he'd struck a mountain. Kaelric stood firm. His aura widened again, snapping into place like a second barrier around him. Then he spoke, every syllable carrying to the ridge, carried by every tongue. "No more war, not on this soil." The warband froze. The villagers froze. Even the wind seemed to cease. Kaelric lifted the hammer and waited. For a moment, time became a breath caught between heartbeats. The orc warband stood frozen at the ridge's crest, their roars dying into stunned silence as Kaelric's barrier shimmered across Stonebrook's gate, blue-white, pulsing softly like a living heartbeat beneath the sky. Dozens of orcs stared down at it, at him, at the hammer he held. Their war paint, streaked across tusks and brows, caught the glow in fractured patterns. They had expected a village cowering behind wooden gates. Not this. Not him. Behind Kaelric, the villagers were equally still. Risa's grip on her hammer loosened, though she didn't lower it. Tovin's eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a sharper, older kind of awe. Kara pressed one hand over her mouth. Arg stood like a man staring at something that shouldn't be possible, yet was undeniably true. Kaelric breathed out, slowly, deliberately. The barrier rippled with his breath. He lifted the seed-forged hammer, not threateningly, but simply so that all could see it. The mountain wind carried the faint hum from its core, the same resonance that had sung through the Heartforge, the same resonance poured from the seed itself. Kaelric took one step forward. The aura widened with him. When he spoke, every creature within its reach, orc, elf, dwarf, goblin, human, heard the words in their own tongue. I said there will be no war here. The warband stirred. Confusion, uncertainty. A few snarled openly, pressing against the shimmering barrier with the flat of their axes. Grask's voice shook beside him. Kaelric, be cautious. They do not know you. I know, Kaelric whispered, but I know what they're here for. He raised his gaze to the ridge and found the warband leader. A towering orc stepped forward, taller than Grask by half a head, shoulders wrapped in the hide of some great beast, tusks carved with tribal runes. He held a massive hammer of stone and bone, though its weight seemed nothing in his grip. His eyes locked on Kaelric with a force that hit like a physical blow. He spoke in Urkthal, his voice a guttural thunder. Grothun Makshara. Those outside Kaelric's aura heard only the harsh syllables, but within it, villagers, friends, even Kara and Narg, heard the translated meaning. The mountain has spoken. Another orc barked something sharp and questioning behind him. The leader answered without breaking contact with Kaelric. He carries the echo. Kaelric felt the words settle inside him, like something ancient recognizing something younger. Grask's breath hitched. Tukorshun. I had thought it only a story. Risa glanced between them. What story? Grask swallowed, then answered loudly enough for Kaelric's aura to translate it all. Long before clans broke into war, the mountain chose a voice. Someone the Archon would answer. Someone who could speak across bloodlines. He stared at Kaelric. That was legend. Kaelric didn't blink. I don't want to be anyone's legend. The warband leader descended the ridge, each footstep sending a ripple through the earth. The other orcs parted for him, though many still held weapons ready. He stopped just on the other side of the barrier. Kaelric stood alone, no shield, no armor, no line of warriors behind him. Only the flame in his palm, the hammer in his other hand, and the resonance humming through his bones. The leader leaned forward, tusks glinting in the arcing light. Show me your strength. Break the wall, faces. Risa cursed under her breath. Of all the blasted fool things, Dovin stiffened. Kaelric, don't engage. That barrier is the only thing. Kaelric raised the flame gently. The barrier softened, just at the edges, like a breath being held. I will not fight you, he said. The orc leader growled, voice rising like distant thunder. You insult us. No, Kaelric shook his head. I refuse because I choose peace, not fear, not submission. Choice. Every being in the valley, orc, elf, dwarf, goblin, human, heard that word in their own language. The orc leader's eyes narrowed. Then he lifted his hammer. Dozens of orcs gripped their weapons, ready to surge forward the moment the barrier fell. Kaelric raised his hand. The flame expanded, not violently, not explosively, but with a calm, controlled brilliance that illuminated every face in the valley. The barrier shimmered brighter, responding to him alone. He spoke again. No more war, not on this soil. His voice carried into the mountains themselves. The ground vibrated. Arcane veins lit like rivers of fire. Even the orcs closest to the barrier flinched, because the sound did not feel like a human voice. It sounded like mountain stone, forge fire, a hammer fall in still air, a voice that had waited 15 years to be heard again. The orc leader lowered his hammer slowly, not fully, not in surrender, but in reconsideration. He looked Kaelric up and down with new calculation. You are young, too young for such words. Kaelric swallowed. Age doesn't decide truth. The warband behind him murmured, some in Urkthal, others in ancient dialects. Even Kaelric's aura struggled to smooth, but the meaning is clear. He is not lying. The mountain's light follows him. The hammer hums. This might be the one. The leader stepped closer until he was inches from the barrier. His breath fogged against the surface as if it were glass. If you are a voice, then speak. What do you ask of us? Kaelric lowered the flame slightly, letting it dim in his hand. I ask you to stop here, he said, to end the cycle of blood, and to hear what Grask has to say. Grask jolted. Me? His eyes seemed to ask, but the aura made his meaning audible. Kaelric, I am no chieftain. You're the first orc Stonebrook has ever seen who didn't raise a weapon, Kaelric said gently. You are the one the village learned to understand. He nodded toward the warband leader. And you're the one they'll listen to. Grask hesitated, then stepped forward. The warband reacted instantly. Dozens of weapons raised in warning. Kaelric pressed his palm lightly to the barrier. A sweep of calm radiated outward. Grask drew a breath, then spoke in Urkthal. Raw, heavy, honest. We came seeking answers, not war. Through the aura, the villagers heard the words in common, Dervak and Alarian. The orcs heard them in Urkthal. The warband leader tilted his head. Then we listen. That was the first moment the valley had felt peace since the tremors began. Kaelric exhaled and lowered the flame fully. The barrier flickered, still present, still ready, but gentler now, a living thread instead of a wall. Behind him, the villagers loosened grips on weapons. Kara's shoulders sagged with relief. Ark barely breathed. Risa muttered, Forge's breath. He actually did it. Tovin whispered, He didn't just stop a battle, he changed the air of the valley. Kaelric didn't hear them. He was watching the orc leader, who watched him back with something like respect. Then, without warning, the flame in Kaelric's hand pulsed sharply. A warning. He staggered, gripping the hammer as a surge of information, not words, not images, but understanding washed through him. Crix hissed, backing up. Grask snarled low. Tovin reached for him. Risa called his name. Kaelric's vision blurred. The arcane flare behind the warband brightened. Something deeper beneath the mountain shifted. He fell to one knee, breathing hard. The orc leader stepped close to the barrier again. Voice, what do you see? Kaelric lifted his head. The words came out in a whisper, but everyone heard them clearly, translated into every tongue. This isn't the end. This was the first spark. Something else is coming. The flame guttered in his palm. The hammer's hum deepened, vibrating like a warning bell. And for the first time since the forge awoke, Kaelric felt afraid. Chapter 38. Fire at the Gate. The tremors that had rattled Kaelric's bones eased at last, leaving a faint ache behind his eyes. The barrier still shimmered around him, thin now, more a veil than a wall, but steady enough to separate the two sides. For a heartbeat, there was silence. The warband watched him. Stonebrook watched him. The mountains watched him. Then, as if the stillness itself were an insult, an orc in the second rank spat a curse in Urkthal and surged forward. Another followed, and another. A handful only, but enough. Weapons raised, tusks bared, eyes burning with the beliefs that hesitation was weakness, and weakness demanded blood. Kaelric felt it before he saw it, the pressure in the air, the ripple of fury, the spike of heat against the barrier. Risa swore sharply, stepping in front of Tovin. Crix dove under a cart, shrieking in skitter speak. Villagers tightened their grip on tools, bows and blades. Arg shouted, "Hold your lines!" Kara cried Kaelric's name, but the hotheads were already on the move. They slammed against the softened barrier. The shield flared, bending inward with their momentum. Kaelric gasped. His knees hit the dirt. The barrier, his barrier, shuddered. If they struck again, it might collapse. The orc warband leader roared, "Gachrul, hold!" His voice cracked the air like a falling tree. His warriors hesitated, but the momentum was already there. They were too close, too furious, too caught in the moment to stop completely. Then another voice cut through the chaos. Grask. He didn't shout. He didn't roar. He simply said, in low, raw Urkthrall, "Torok!" The leader froze. Not the hotheads, the leader. His eyes snapped toward Grask, and Kaelric felt the weight of the word settle in the air like a stone dropped into water. Torok. Family name. Old clan name. Shared bloodline. The leader took a single step forward, his expression curved in shock, and something dangerously close to grief. "Grask?" The hotheads, all younger warriors, did not recognize the word, but the leader did. His hammer lowered by an inch. His stance faltered. He took another step, staring at Grask as if seeing a ghost. "You live, then?" Grask swallowed hard, jaw trembling. "Barely." Kaelric's aura softened the translation, turning the guttural exchange into words the villagers could understand, though none of them gasped the depth of what the two orcs truly shared. The hotheads kept pushing the barrier. They hadn't heard the exchange, or they hadn't cared. The barrier flickered again. Kaelric forced himself upright. "No," he breathed. "Not like this. Not now." Grask snapped into motion, stepping between the barrier and the rushing warriors. At the exact same moment, the warband leader moved too, slamming the haft of his hammer into the earth so hard the ground shook. Both of them, Grask and the leader, stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking their own warriors from the gate. The hothead skidded to a halt, snarling in confusion. The leader thundered, "Stand down!" Grask added, voice hoarse but firm, "No blood, not here." Kaelric's aura carried both voices across the valley, translating for elves, dwarves, humans, and even Crix who poked his head above a barrel with wise eyes. Risa muttered, "Forge bless us. The two of them are stopping their own." Tovin whispered, "Because they're kin." Ark's voice was low. "This just changed everything." Kaelric exhaled shakily and lowered his hand. The barrier softened further, not falling, but loosening like a held breath. On the ridge, the hothead orcs glared between their leader and Grask, torn between rage and obedience. The leader growled, "You shame me, charging without command." The closest hothead spat a defensive curse. The leader stepped forward and cracked his palm across the younger warrior's tusk. A sharp ring echoed through the valley. "Discipline or death." The hotheads lowered their weapons. Grask opened his mouth to speak again, then flinched as the hammer in Kaelric's hand brightened behind him, its glow sharpening to a clean, impossible white. Kaelric felt the surge ripple up his arm. The mountain answered. The white glow sharpened, clean, cold, and steady. Not the soft pulse of the Arkan, not the fractured shimmer of the vase stones, not even the Heartforge's blue fire. This was something deeper, older, tied to a story only Kaelric's blood remembered. The orc leader's eyes widened at the sight of it. Grask stiffened as if the light pressed against his chest. And the villagers? Some stepped back, some held their breath, some whispered prayers. Kaelric lifted the hammer, though it felt heavier than ever, as if the entire valley leaned on it. The aura around him deepened, thickened like a warm current spreading outward. Risa blinked, startled. "I hear 'em," she murmured. "Their voices, in me own tongue." Tovin swallowed hard. "It's him, not the mountain. Him." Even Arg had no words, only the shudder of recognition that came from something he had once felt at the trials, a lifetime ago. Kaelric steadied himself, breath short but controlled. "Now," he said quietly, "to all of you, to both sides." The warband bristled, but none moved. Their leader kept his stance between them and the gate. Grask shifted forward, glancing between Kaelric and the leader, his cousin, his rival, his last living tie to a clan that had cast him out. Kaelric met Grask's eyes. "Speak," Kaelric said. "Let them hear the truth from the one they've ignored." The aura flared almost imperceptibly, focusing around Grask as he took a shaking breath. Then, in guttural Urkthal, that the aura softened into every language, he spoke. "I left the clan because I would not kill without cause." The hothead snarled, but the leader's jaw tightened, not in anger, in memory. Grass continued, louder this time. "I found no home, no place where I was welcome." He gestured to Stonebrook with a trembling hand. "Until here." Risa blinked, stunned. Tovin lowered his staff. Even Kara's breath hitched. Ark murmured under his breath, "Damn, he's doing it." Grask swallowed. "These people, elf, dwarf, human, they did not trust me, but they did not kill me either." He stepped closer to the barrier, facing his own blood. "And that is more than our clan ever gave me." A ripple passed through the warband. Not shame, not pity. Recognition. Grask's voice cracked, but he held firm. "Stonebrook is no enemy, and neither am I." The leader exhaled through flared tusks. His voice, when he answered, was low and weighted. "Torok, we thought you dead." Grask looked away, jaw clenched. "Perhaps I was." The leader took a step forward, then another. He placed one hand, slowly, deliberately, against the barrier. The white light rippled around his fingers like water. Kaelric felt the barrier tug at him, waiting, asking. Not to fall, but to trust. He lowered his hand. The barrier dissolved like mist at dawn. The villagers gasped. Several dwarves lifted hammers instinctively. A row of elves raised their palms for spells they hoped they wouldn't have to cast. The warband tensed as well, muscles coiling. One spark, just one, and the valley would drown in blood. Kaelric took a single step between the sides. Just one. Risa grabbed Tovin's wrist and whispered, "Don't move." Crix froze, halfway to diving under a wagon. Arg's fist clenched. Kara whispered a prayer she hadn't spoken in years. Kaelric raised the hammer. It shone like a star. "No more war," he said, his voice quiet but unshakable. "Not today, not here." The warband leader studied him, slow, calculating, ancient in patience and judgment. Then he lowered his own hammer. "If Torok stands here," he rumbled, "then I will not spill his allies' blood." Grask's eyes went hot with emotion he couldn't hide. The hotheads exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared disobey the leader now. Kaelric released the breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The truce wasn't peace, not yet. But it was a beginning, a fragile one, a necessary one. The orc leader looked Kaelric up and down, then spoke softly in Urthal. You carry a thing that is not of this world. Kaelric felt the hammer thrum in his hand. I know. Does it lead you, or do you lead it? Kaelric didn't answer, because the hammer pulsed again, hard enough that he stumbled. The mountains groaned in reply, and for the second time that day, the valley changed. A white pulse ignited along the arcane veins, racing across the ridge in a sheet of light. The orcs recoiled, the villagers flinched. Even the leader stepped back a pace. Kaelric's breath caught, because the hammer wasn't glowing anymore. It was calling. Chapter 39. The Pact of the Flame. The white pulse rolled across the valley like a breath drawn by the world itself. It washed over Stonebrook's roofs, the river bridge, the outer fields where elven farmers still stood staring. It flickered through the chimneys of dwarven forges as though greeting old fire. It illuminated even the last of the orc warband on the ridge, painting tusks and armor with pale brilliance. And all of it converged, every strand, every glimmer, toward the heart of the village, toward the forge, toward Kaelric. He felt it tug at him, a steady pull that wasn't violent but left no room for refusal. He staggered once. Grask caught his elbow instinctively. The warband leader barked a command that spread through his warriors like a wave. To the fire! Follow him! The villagers watched as orcs descended into Stonebrook for the first time in its history with something other than hostility. Suspicion? Yes. Wariness? Certainly. But not violence. Not now. The path toward the forge seemed narrower than usual, crowded with dwarfs gripping tongs and smithing hammers, elves with glowing palms prepared for healing or restraint, and humans, only 3 of them, who stood closer than anyone else. Kara kept to Kaelric's right, Arg to his left. Lyra ran out the house before Kara could stop her and clung to Kaelric's arms until Arg lifted her gently away. Stay with your mother, he whispered. She did, but her eyes never left her brother. As they neared the forge, the white light dimmed enough for the arcane's natural glow to reclaim its place. The air grew warm. The old forge pit, cold for weeks, simmered with rising heat. And the anvil? The anvil was glowing. Not red hot, not molten, just alive. Risa froze at the threshold. Kael, she whispered, voice cracking around the syllable. I've seen forges wake. I've worked them since I could walk. But this ain't walking. This is remembering. Tovin stepped beside her. Then perhaps it remembers what was meant to be forged here all along. Crick scrambled into a high beam to watch from above, hugging a support post until his knuckles turned pale. The warband approached slowly, some touching hands to their tusks in instinctive reverence. Only 2 stepped inside the forge building itself. Grask, breathing hard, eyes deep with memory and fear. The warband leader, shoulders squared, as if preparing for fate itself. Kaelric stood before the anvil. The hammer in his hand pulsed once more, white on the surface, but deeper beneath layers of blue and silver shifting like a heartbeat. Arg recognized the pattern. Kara did too. They said nothing. Kaelric lifted the hammer. His hand trembled. Risa whispered to Tovin, He ain't gonna strike with it, right? Tovin shook his head. No, he's returning it. Kaelric set the hammer onto the anvil. The world inhaled. And the pulse, the same pulse that had shaken the valley, now flowed softly outward in a ring, gentle as a flame's flicker. Elves felt their breath align with it. Dwarves felt their heartbeat steady to it. Orcs stiffened with a jolt of familiarity that none of them understood. Grask placed a hand on his own chest. "Kaelric," he whispered, voice thin. What have you done?" The light from the hammer didn't spread wildly. It did not flare or burn. It simply connected. One thread of light reached from the hammer to Grask's chest, another to Risa, another to Tovin, another to Crix, who squeaked and nearly fell from his beam. Dozens more threads stretched outward, touching villagers near the doorway. Even those beyond the forge felt a warmth settle in their ribs, synchronizing breath and pulse. Arg leaned on one hand against the doorframe. Kara pressed a hand to her throat. Not fear. Recognition. Kaelric's voice was quiet, but the aura carried it to every heart. "The Heart Forge awoke because of us. All of us. And it gave this. So we could choose not to destroy each other." The threads brightened. The hammer's glow steadied. Grask took a shaky step forward, then another. He bowed, not to Kaelric, but to the hammer, and to what it represented. "For the first time in my life," he said, voice breaking, "I see a world that might welcome me." Risa stepped forward next. Her voice was low, reverent. I'll stand for this, for whatever you call this." Tovin lifted his hand in a slow, solemn gesture of assent. Crix chittered quietly. Yes, I say yes. Flameboy, yes." The warband leader approached, tusks low, eyes narrow with ancient contemplation. He placed his palm over his chest. "I swear by stone and storm, by clan and exile, I will protect this flame." One by one, the rest of the warband followed. They knelt. They bowed. They placed fists to chests. Not submission, recognition. A pact. Kaelric felt it all wash through him. The unity, the fear, the hope, the struggle of old wounds trying to find new meaning. He lifted the hammer once more. Its glow steadied, warm and sure. And just when the forge seemed ready to settle into peace, the mountain trembled. Just once. Enough to knock dust from the forge rafters. Enough to silence every voice. Enough to send a sharp stab of warning into Kaelric's heart. Arg's head snapped upward. Kara's eyes widened. Grask growled low. The warband leader whispered a word in Urkthal that needed no translation. "Awakening." The hammer pulsed again, white, bright, blinding, and Kaelric realized this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. The mountain tremored once more, not violently, but deep and resonant, as though something beneath the stone shifted in its sleep. Kaelric lifted his head, breath catching. The hammer on the anvil glowed white again, not flaring, not burning, but focused, precise. Risa's hammer dipped in her grip. Tovin leaned forward as if drawn by an unseen current. Crix hissed and scrambled higher into the rafters. The warband stiffened in instinctive reverence. Arg and Kara exchanged a look that only two people who survived the trials could understand. Kaelric stepped forward. A thin seam opened along the top of the anvil. Clean, controlled, impossibly smooth. As if the mountain itself had chosen that exact line. Light pushed upward through the crack, first darkened blue, then shifting into seed white, then blending into something that belonged to neither world. A small crystalline shape rose into view. Kaelric reached out carefully and lifted it free. It was warm, denser than any metal, smooth on one side like a seed fragment, but etched with thin glowing lines on the other. Patterns like circuits, pulsing faintly as if waiting to wake. Kara whispered, "What is that?" Kaelric stared at it, struck silent by a certainty he didn't understand. "I don't know," he admitted softly, "but I know who it's for." He turned and placed it into Arg's waiting hand. Arg froze. The weight, the warmth, the familiar but not seed curvature, all of it hit him at once. "Kael," he whispered, "it looks like—" "It's not a fragment," Kaelric said quickly. "I'd feel it if it was." Arg thumbed the etched circuitry. He didn't understand what the lines meant. He didn't understand the purpose. He didn't understand the technology. But the moment it touched his palm, his miner's intuition told him one thing. It fit the widow. Somewhere, some part of her had never been able to repair. Something he'd never been able to replace. He knew it like he knew the weight of his own heartbeat. "It's for the ship," he murmured, voice uneven. Kaelric nodded. "I don't know what it does. I just know you need it." Arg swallowed hard. Kara touched her husband's wrist. "Arg, be careful." "I will." Around them, the forge fire roared upward in a sudden plume of white flame, shooting through the chimney and splitting into 4 beams across the sky. Elves cried out. Dwarves shielded their faces. The warband took a step back. Even Grask lowered his head. Only Kaelric remained still, the hammer beside him pulsing once, like a heartbeat shared between worlds. The flame dimmed. Silence followed. The warband leader bowed his head. "The pact is made." Grask knelt. Others followed. Elves and dwarves placed hands over their hearts. Kaelric felt the weight of all of it settle into the hammer and into him. Risa whispered, "Forge, save us. The lads just changed the whole world." Arg closed his fingers around the core object. Kara whispered, "What will it do?" Arg shook his head. "I don't know. I have to ask Iona." Kaelric looked at him, eyes serious, older than 15. "Dad, I think she's the only one who can tell you." Arg nodded. And that was when the mountain trembled again. Not as a warning, as an announcement. Something had begun. Something that would change everything. The hammer pulsed once more. The end of Part 8 of Void Miner, Seed of Change.